The grand ballroom glittered with golden light, every chandelier shimmering like a dream carved out of glass. The guests whispered in admiration, cameras flashed, and a live orchestra played softly in the background. At the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, the youngest self-made CEO in the country, a man the world envied. Dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, he looked like the perfect image of success and control. Today, he was supposed to have it all: power, prestige, and the love of Amelia, the elegant woman waiting at the altar. Yet behind his confident smile, a strange restlessness stirred inside him. He had fought his way to the top through sleepless nights, losses, and sacrifices that only he remembered. But as he adjusted his tie before the mirror, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. A quiet voice in his mind whispered that fate was not finished with him yet. He brushed it off, forcing himself to smile as his assistant entered and said, "Sir, everyone's ready." Daniel nodded and walked toward the aisle, each step heavy with unseen doubt. The crowd rose in admiration. Music swelled, and Amelia's eyes sparkled with love. But just as he reached the front, the grand doors of the ballroom creaked open. The sound cut through the melody like thunder. Every head turned. Daniel froze. A woman stepped inside, her presence graceful, her eyes hauntingly familiar. And beside her stood a little girl, clutching her hand, looking around with innocent curiosity. The moment their eyes met, Daniel felt his heartbeat falter. The girl's eyes were the same shade of gray as his own. The world around him blurred. In that instant, he knew his perfect day was about to become the most unforgettable moment of his life. For a few seconds, Daniel couldn't move. The music faded into a distant hum, and the world seemed to spin slower as his gaze locked onto the woman standing at the door. Lila. The name echoed in his mind like an old melody he had tried to forget. 8 years ago, she was his everything, his dream, his fire, his weakness. And then one stormy night, she was gone, leaving only a silence that even success couldn't fill. He had told himself she was a closed chapter, but seeing her now felt like the past had returned to rewrite his future. The guests whispered, confused by the sudden stillness in the room. Amelia glanced between Daniel and the mysterious woman, her smile trembling slightly. "Do you know her?" she asked softly. Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His chest tightened as the little girl beside Lila peeked out, her gray eyes glimmering with innocent wonder. There was something in that gaze, something that mirrored his own reflection too perfectly to ignore. Lila took a hesitant step forward, her fingers tightening around the child's hand. The soft click of her heels echoed louder than the music. "Daniel," she said quietly, and even from across the room he heard the tremor in her voice. It wasn't anger, it was pain, years of unspoken words pressed into one fragile moment. He forced himself to move, every step heavy as the crowd parted. His world of order and certainty was cracking apart before everyone's eyes. "Why now?" he finally managed to whisper when they stood face to face. Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. She gently pushed the little girl forward. "Because she deserves to know who her father is," she said. The room gasped. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. The little girl clutched her mother's hand tighter and looked up at him with the same gray eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. In that single heartbeat, the truth he never expected and always feared was standing right in front of him. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, so thick that even the soft notes of the orchestra seemed afraid to rise. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the little girl, the small, innocent face that carried his own reflection. Every inch of him trembled, not with fear, but with disbelief. He wanted to speak, to deny, to demand an explanation, but his words refused to come. The crowd's curious eyes pierced through him, the whispers growing louder with every second. Amelia stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "Daniel, what is happening?" He turned to her, but the confusion in her eyes made it harder to breathe. He didn't know what to say. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? He looked back at Lila, hoping she would speak, hoping she would tell him this was all some cruel mistake. But her eyes told a story far too real. "You deserve to know," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm around them. "I tried to protect her, Daniel. I tried to protect you both." He felt as if the walls were closing in. "Protect us from what?" he asked, his voice breaking. Lila's gaze fell to the ground, her hand tightening around her daughter's. "From a world that wouldn't understand. From a choice I made when I was too scared to face you." Her words cut through him, sharp and soft all at once. Daniel dropped his head, running a hand over his face. Memories flashed, nights of laughter, of dreams they had shared, of promises made under stars. She had left without a word, and now he understood why. Not because she stopped loving him, but because love itself had frightened her more than anything else. The little girl looked up at him then, her voice small and pure. "Mommy said my daddy builds big things that touch the sky. Is that you?" The innocence in her tone shattered what was left of his composure. He knelt down slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "Maybe," he said softly, his throat tight. "Maybe I am." In that moment, the world around him didn't matter. The guests, the cameras, the whispers. There was only the child in front of him, and the woman who once held his heart. And as he looked at them, he knew his life was about to change in a way no business deal or wedding vow ever could. Daniel stood in stunned silence, his heart waging a war between the man he had become and the man he used to be. The guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something far deeper than gossip was unfolding before their eyes. Amelia lowered her gaze, tears glimmering at the edges, her perfect smile gone. "Daniel," she whispered again, her voice trembling, "is this true?" But he couldn't answer. His mind was spinning too fast, memories, regrets, and the haunting truth that he might have a daughter he never knew. He took a hesitant step toward Lila, his voice softer now, fragile like glass. "Why didn't you tell me? You knew what this would do to me, to her." Lila's eyes were filled with both guilt and strength. "I wanted to," she said quietly. "But when I left, you were chasing dreams so much bigger than both of us. I thought, if I told you, you'd have to choose. And I didn't want you to lose everything you worked for because of me." Daniel's hands curled into fists. "You took that choice away from me," he said, his voice low, not in anger but in pain. Lila's eyes shimmered and she nodded faintly. "I did, and I've lived with that regret every single day." The little girl looked between them, her innocent face clouded with confusion. She didn't understand the weight of what was happening. All she saw were two strangers who shared her eyes. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. That single question shattered Daniel completely. He knelt in front of her, trying to steady his breath. "No, sweetheart," he said, his voice breaking. "You didn't do anything wrong." Lila knelt beside her daughter, gently brushing her hair. "Her name is Emma," she said, her voice trembling. "She's the best thing I ever did." Daniel repeated the name under his breath. Emma. It felt like a whisper from fate, a second chance wrapped in innocence. He reached out his hand, unsure if he had the right to. But Emma smiled shyly and placed her tiny hand in his. That simple touch ignited something inside him, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. For the first time that night, Daniel didn't care about his image, his fortune, or the whispers. In that moment, he wasn't a CEO standing before a crowd. He was a father meeting his child for the first time, and as he looked into Emma's eyes, he realized that no amount of success could fill the emptiness of the years he had lost without her. The sound of camera shutters and murmurs filled the air, but Daniel heard none of it. Time had slowed to a heartbeat. He stood between two worlds, the one he had built through ambition and power, and the one standing before him now, fragile but real. Emma's hand was still in his, and her small fingers trembled slightly. He squeezed gently, offering comfort he didn't fully understand how to give. His entire life had been about control, planning, perfection. But this moment was chaos, and yet it felt more honest than anything he had ever known. Amelia took a step forward, her voice faint but steady. "Daniel, we have hundreds of people watching. The press, your company. This can't happen here." She was trying to hold her dignity together, and he could see the pain behind her calm mask. For the first time, Daniel didn't care about the headlines. He looked at her with quiet sincerity. "Amelia, I'm sorry. You deserve a man whose heart is completely yours, mine." His gaze drifted toward Lila and Emma. "Mine never truly left where it began." A silence followed that felt heavier than words. Amelia nodded slowly, tears spilling despite her best effort to stay composed. She turned away gracefully, and though her departure broke the tension, it left an ache in the air. Daniel watched her go, knowing that even the strongest walls in his life had now fallen. He turned back to Lila, his voice low and filled with everything he had never said. "I missed you every day. Even when I tried to convince myself I didn't." Lila looked up, her eyes glistening. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she whispered. "But fate has its own timing." Emma looked between them, smiling shyly. "Does this mean we can be together now?" she asked innocently. Daniel laughed softly, a sound mixed with joy and sorrow. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, "but I know I don't want to miss another second of it." He reached out, placing a hand gently on Lila's shoulder, his eyes locked with hers. The years apart had changed them, hardened them, but beneath it all, the same spark still lived. And as the music started again, softly this time, Daniel realized something powerful. Life doesn't always follow the plans we make, but sometimes the unplanned moments reveal who we truly are. The man who once chased success had finally found something worth more than everything he had built, a reason to begin again. The night air outside the ballroom was cool and calm, a striking contrast to the storm that had just passed inside. The lights from the grand estate glowed behind Daniel as he stood in the garden, staring at the horizon where dawn would soon rise. He could still hear faint music drifting through the open doors, but his mind was quiet for the first time in years. Lila and Emma stood beside him, two souls who had unknowingly carried the missing pieces of his life. For a long moment no one spoke. Words felt too small for what the heart was trying to say. Emma broke the silence first. "Mommy says stars are wishes that never gave up," she said, pointing toward the sky. Daniel smiled faintly, his chest tightening with emotion. "Then tonight," he said softly, "I think one of them finally came true." Lila turned to look at him, her eyes glistening with the same warmth that had once set his entire world alight. There was no anger now, no resentment, only the quiet understanding of two people who had endured pain and still found their way back to what truly mattered. "I didn't think you'd want us in your world," Lila whispered. "Your life is so different now." Daniel shook his head, stepping closer. "All of this," he said, gesturing toward the mansion, "means nothing if I can't share it with the people who remind me why I started." His voice softened. "I lost myself chasing everything, and somehow you found the part I left behind." Emma yawned and leaned against her mother. Daniel smiled, gently lifting her into his arms. She rested her head on his shoulder, her small heartbeat steady against his chest. In that simple moment, Daniel felt something stronger than success, peace. The kind that comes from forgiveness, from love reborn after pain. The next morning, the headlines were merciless. The wedding that never was, the CEO who chose love over power. But Daniel didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't living for the world's approval. He was living for something real. As the sun rose, casting gold across the sky, Lila took his hand. Their past was heavy, their future uncertain, but hope shimmered between them like morning light breaking through clouds. Daniel looked at them both and smiled. "Maybe," he said quietly. "This isn't the end everyone expected. It's the beginning we were always meant to have."